You can study in the morning, you can study at night. You can study outside by a campfire light. You can study with the rabbi.
I, along with many of my friends and colleagues in the Jewish community, were just stunned by some information that came out of Israel. Information that tells us that the rash of bomb threats that have been called into Jewish community centers across the United States, and as it turns out, threats around the world, were perhaps perpetrated by an 18-year-old boy, an 18-year-old Jewish boy with dual American-Israeli citizenship who lived in Israel. Boy, this is our worst fear, right? That this kind of violence, that these kinds of attacks would be perpetrated by one of our own. I remember distinctly when I heard that Yitzhak Rabin had been shot by a Jew, and what a visceral gut reaction I had to that. This is disgusting. This is terrifying. And I also heard people say, well, we've heard this before, haven't we? Someone predicted that this may be the case because President Trump had said that possibly, or he had intimated that possibly these threats were not being made by people who agree with him, but perhaps it was an inside job. And so now here we are, and it was an inside job. But I want to be really clear about something. As troubling as it is that an Israeli Jew may have done this, what's more troubling to me is that we live in a world where this is okay by anybody's standards. That we live in a world in which our leaders and institutions promote this kind of thinking, endorse this kind of behavior by anyone. We learn from our leaders. We learn how to behave from those who have positions of power. And so people in positions of power can say, oh, this was an inside job. And indeed, we Jews, we should be embarrassed and ashamed that we have allowed this to exist in our midst. But we should not forget that this person who did this does not live on an island. He does not live in a bubble. He lives in a world in which anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, racism, bigotry have found new voices, have found a new stage on which to stand, and have been endorsed by some of the loudest, most prominent voices in our world. That needs to be part of our conversation, not just who is the person who did this, but what is the environment in which a person chooses to do something like this, and who is responsible for that environment. Of course, it's all of us. But I also hope that we take a moment to recognize those who are helping to shape that environment at the very top. I am not blaming Donald Trump for this. I am asking for our leaders and our institutions and all of us to take responsibility for the environment which allows something like this to happen, for the environment that allows people to hate, an environment that allows people to bring fear and violence. It's that environment that we have to address, not just the individual perpetrators, but the environment in which something like that bigotry, that hatred is allowed to exist. It's not enough to just wipe out those who commit the crimes. We have to address the environment in which those crimes exist. And that, my friends, is all of our responsibility.
We're talking Torah. Talking Torah.